Have you
Yes,
got
sir.
it back?
Audible. Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay. You say Matthew Arnold, in his famous book, and I have already mentioned, he was an eminent critic of the Victorian times as far as the history of English literature is concerned. He says in his famous book, The Study of Poetry, as in his capacity as a critic, he says, more and more mankind will discover that we have to turn to poetry to interpret life for us, to console us, to sustain us. Without poetry, our science will appear incomplete, and most of what now passes with us for religion and philosophy will be replaced by poetry. Science, he further says, science will appear incomplete without it, for finally and truly, because this is what in fact Matthew Arnold says. And now, one point is very clear in his interpretation of poetry or literature. He said that finally mankind will have to return back to the realm of poetry, to the realm of literature. And, and it is literature that will finally interpret life, that will finally define what life is all about. And for our sustenance, he further says, this is what I'm trying to define from his, statement. Uh, you know, Literature alone will interpret and define life, and it will give us consolation in the face of adversity. When there is none to give us consolation, it is literature, it is poetry that gives us consolation. Presence of science. I believe all of you can hear me, sir. Science, he further says, will also give us, a direction to go ahead with confidence. Now, there is another trick. There is another trick to this statement. And for that, he further says, but before I quote him, let us try to understand what literature or any kind of literature, be it poetry, be it drama, be it novel, be it short stories, be it anything whatsoever, what does actually literature provide us? What does it provide us? The fact of the matter is that, as many writers, even T.S. Eliot says in his famous poem "The Wasteland," he says that the entire Western civilization. Hello, can you hear me, sir? Hello, can you hear me, sir? Can you hear me, sir?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Okay. Now, talking about T.S. Eliot, I switched over to a different poet called T.S. Eliot in the modern times. T.S. Eliot, in his famous and landmark poem, The Wasteland, further defines the Western civilization. And he says it's a wasteland. It's a civilization, it's a society where, moral degeneration has taken place. And a society without moral or spiritual strength cannot survive for long. And this is the most crucial point that, Eliot dwells on as far as the Westland is concerned. So the point we can get here is simply this, that, literature gives us an idea and perhaps a better idea and knowledge about who we were, who we are, and what should we aspire to be in the times ahead. This is the most significant point to learn as far as this discussion is concerned. There is and there are certain other issues, like, say for example, in Indian context, when we study Hindi literature, when we study, Sanskrit literature, we are immediately, especially in Sanskrit literature, we are reminded of two great epics in Sanskrit literature. First, the Ramayana, and then the stories of both the epics. Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Okay.
We are with you.
You people are with me?
Yes, we are listening you, all people.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Now, I'm talking about Sanskrit literature. To repeat it once again, I'm talking about the Ramayana, the great epic, the Mahabharata, the great epic, and also the fact that these two great epics teach us why and how practical it is in our life to lead a life like the life of the great character Arjuna, Dronacharya, and the great character called the Bhishma Pitama. There are certain characters, especially in the Mahabharata, whom even today in the contemporary world, every student of science tries to emulate, tries to follow. And there are so many things related to their overall life and character we can follow, and we rather cherish, try to follow. So, what can be those qualities, and what ideas do they actually suggest as far as the qualities in their, life and character are concerned? Let us understand it one by one. Now, when Lord Krishna says that this great war is not something unholy, is not something without the principles of morality, without the principles of righteousness. He actually means that, for any society to survive, for any human society to survive, the rule of law is a precondition. And by rule of law, he means the rule of truth, the rule of morality, the rule of righteousness, the rule of religion. When the great warrior Arjun, if you remember it correctly, gets disillusioned and finds himself confused as to what to do, what not to do, whom to kill and whom not to kill, that Maya and Moha. Now, he becomes an easy victim to Maya and Moha. Lord Krishna appears and gives him a lesson of moral values and teaches him why it is important to make a distinction between a good human being and a bad human being. A distinction between someone, despite being a close relative, and someone who is not following the rule of law or righteousness. So this is how, we get a lot of benefits. And I believe, social media, even social media today, has been extremely beneficial for almost every human being in this postmodern world, especially the youngsters, the new generation, whom I have been teaching for years and years together. My dear friends, my dear students, if you are online and watching me deliver this speech, I have a very strong message to you. I have a very, very significant message for you. The message is that, there is, as elsewhere, everywhere, in every college of engineering, there is a department that basically deals with literature. In your college, I don't know whether there is a department that deals with Hindi literature. As far as your institution is concerned, I cannot say. I haven't got any idea. But there is, quite naturally, and this is the reality, there is a department in your college that deals with teaching of language, promotion of knowledge of language, especially English language. That's what we're trying to do, has been trying to promote. The second point is, when we talk about English language, first of all, you as students try to acquire knowledge of English language. In order to acquire the knowledge of English language, you need to study literature. Without reading any literature composed or written in that language, it is not possible for you to acquire any knowledge of that language, the language called English language. And therefore, it is really very essential for you to study literature as much as possible. And by literature, I mean anything in the written form. There can be no doubt about the fact that there is literature called classic literature. There is literature called cheap literature. Newspapers provide us a set of literature from where we can be benefited a lot. So, study anything written in literature in order to improve your knowledge of English language. Only after you acquire skills in this language, you will be able to appreciate, literature written in that language properly. Now I have something other, other things very, very important to share with you. You know, um, yes, now I have got the point. There are two, poems, very significant poems in English literature. One is The Solitary Reaper, and the other is Ode to Nightingale. And by quoting these two poems, I would try to arrive at the most significant point as to why you as students need to study literature. Any literature, be it English literature or Hindi literature, Bengali literature, or any literature. Now, first of all, let me begin with The Solitary Reaper by William Wordsworth, who was a romantic poet, as most of the teachers or professors in the Department of English are very much familiar with. In The Solitary Reaper, a young girl in a rustic background is reaping the food crops and singing. I believe and I hope most of you come from the rustic background, from the countryside, and you might have seen many women, young or old, working in the fields, working and singing. What kind of a landscape does it, present? The reality is that such a scene presents an extraordinarily valuable, landscape. And, they remain there in our minds forever. You might have been face to face with such landscapes in your rural life, because most of you belong to the countryside. Now, Lucy, the imaginary name, is that girl. She's quite young, she's beautiful, she's singing, she's reaping the food crops, and it's a, countryside setting. Now, what can you learn? What can we learn from such a beautiful landscape? Very simple. Let us learn from the life of Lucy, a simple girl. Wordsworth, points out, this girl is born and bred up in nature. She's born and bred up in nature. She has grown up in nature. Everything about Lucy is pure. Her life remains based on the fundamentals of purity and innocence. What an excellent landscape it is. And we can learn a lot. We can learn, lessons of innocence from the life of this girl. She is as innocent, as as anything else in the world. She is as, pure as anything imaginable in this world. She is as pure as anything imaginable in this world. Apart from these things, her life and as a teacher, and your teacher also teaches you everything about
Yes, sir.
Lucy, everything about Lucy. Hello? Hello? Hello?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
You can hear me, sir?
Sir.
Okay. Now, apart from all these things that we can quite easily learn from the innocent, pure life of Lucy, we can also learn as well at the same time. For example, her simple life. Had written a very famous book, Far from Maddie Crowd. Lucy's life presents that kind of a sort of a spectacle where, she reigns based in a sort of setting that is far, far away from the madding crowd of the modern world. This is the difference between the world in which we are living at the moment and the world Lucy lived at one point of time, of course, in an imaginary world. So simplicity is what we do need to learn from her life. And Wordsworth himself was a great advocate of what we call simple living and high thinking. And he perhaps once said, simple living and high thinking must be the motto of our lives. So Lucy's life teaches us a lot of lessons to us. And that was, that all happened in the writings of William Wordsworth during the Romantic period in British English literature, as far as the history of British English literature is concerned. Now, there is another poem I have just mentioned, Ode to a Nightingale by John Keats. Ode to a Nightingale is one of the finest odes ever written in the history of English language. The man who wrote this famous ode died almost at the age of 24 because he suffered, or rather, he had to suffer from tuberculosis, which was an incurable. Ode to a Nightingale came against the backdrop of a situation where the girl John Keats loved deserted him alone after getting to know that the man was suffering from an incurable disease and that he was not going to survive and that he was going to die very soon. Now, Fanny Brown was her name. So, this poem was composed or written against the backdrop of such a serious crisis in the life of John Keats. Now, talking about the poem, Keats, as a poet, when he was there in Italy, listens to a nightingale when he is reported to have been staying with one of his friends there. He listens to a nightingale. And, I hope you are familiar, my students are familiar with the bird called nightingale. I'm, I'm very much sure that all of you are familiar with this bird. In our country, this bird is what we call perhaps cuckoo, if I remember it correctly. It's this bird is famous for its sweet voice. Sir, can you hear me? For
Yes, sir.
Yes,
For
sir.
its sweet voice, for its melodious voice. Now, when he listens to the melodious song of the nightingale, is immediately transported into a different world. A world where there was no agony, a world where there was no freight or fever, a world where there was no suffering, a world where there was eternity, a world where there was eternal peace and eternal bliss. Now, the very reading of such an excellent ode provides us so many things at a time. First of all, let us analyze it. Now, as you can quite easily guess, I have pointed it out a few seconds ago. He was suffering from an incurable disease. There was a serious crisis in his life. He was going to die. Just imagine how a person feels like, how a human being feels like when he is made to understand that he would be leaving the world very soon and that the person would not be surviving for long. It's just imagine the frame of mind. The frame of mind he might have been put into. John Keats, the poet, might have been put into after getting to know that, there were counted days in his life. In that state of mental equilibrium he was when he heard the melodious song of the nightingale. And there was something special. There was something he had, there was something there in the song he had never experienced, he had never imagined. And, those elements of eternal bliss, divine bliss or divine happiness in the melodious song of the song took the poet to a different world where he is able to forget the fever and the freight. Such extraordinary things literature can do to our lives. Wordsworth says on more than one occasion, Wordsworth in his long literary career has pointed out, perhaps several times, that, nature and human life cannot be studied separately. Separation from nature means separation from life itself. And what is nature? Literature is the manifestation of human life and universal nature. I never follow a particular principle or theory of literature when we teach my students in the classroom. I simply follow the voice of my conscience and the knowledge of nature and life I have acquired over the period of time as a teacher. On the basis of my experience, I can tell you, for William Wordsworth, as it was to some extent even for John Keats, nature at one point of time in their lives become something eternal, something that can provide us, perennial happiness, perennial joy, and perennial bliss. So they cannot be studied, they cannot be appreciated separately. So literature gives us a very good interpretation of nature and human life. Without a good knowledge and understanding of these two terms, life remains incomplete. And this is what has also been asserted. I mentioned earlier Matthew Arnold, you remember it. So this has also been, asserted quite a number of times by Matthew Arnold as well. Now, coming back to the poem Ode to Nightingale, there is no doubt about the fact that there was a break. There was a break in the listening of the songs. As far as Keats was concerned, there was a kind of, disruption during the course of his listening to the song of the bird. And the poet is immediately back in the practical life in his practical life, which was, full of misery, which was full of agony. Now, what does, at the end of the day, the song of the nightingale symbolize or rather represent? They represent, art, his song. I mean, the song of the nightingale or any form of art, be it music or any other thing, can give a permanent consolation to all our problems, to all our miseries, of whatever nature they may be. Simply, man's life, and particularly in this postmodern world, life has become absolutely miserable. In this miserable world, we need consolation. And we need consolation for our survival. As we are all familiar with some harsh realities as far as this world is concerned. We have got money, we have got wealth, we have earned everything. We have technology with us, that that can change everything. And to an unprecedented level, already the modern technology has changed our life. But the fact remains that despite all kinds of achievements, our life remains incomplete without acquiring a good understanding and knowledge of such values, the values of life. Ode to a Nightingale teach the values of life, the life of a simple, innocent, rustic girl in the solitary ripper teaches. Life remains incomplete. Our material achievements remain incomplete so long as we are not accompanied. It is a medium, and perhaps the most prompt medium from we can learn how to live life, how to be able to appreciate life, how to be able to understand the real value of life. Because at the end of the day, if we are not in a position, despite all kinds of achievements, despite all kinds of technological achievements and advancements and all, in the field of science and technology, our life remains incomplete unless we are able to understand the meaning of life, the value of life, and all the good values that literature teaches us. Now, I would go to some other things as well. You see, as in every field, and especially in the field of technical education, where and when I say technical education, I basically refer to engineering colleges of your rank and stature. So, in engineering colleges, and especially for students and even those who teach, subjects other than humanities, other than literature. For them, one thing is one thing always proves very crucial, very significant, and that is, you might have sometimes, I hope, you might have got an opportunity to think about, to imagine about, Albert Einstein, Sir Isaac Newton, and even Stephen Hawking, and Oppenheimer, perhaps one of the biggest brains during the modern world in America, and Stephen Hawking, who died recently. All these eminent scientists, in their personal lives, in their autobiographies, they have acknowledged it openly, that without the power of imagination, a scientist cannot survive for long. An engineer cannot survive for long. In other words, for a scientist to be a successful scientist, for an engineer to be a successful engineer, and for their lives to be successful, they require a particular tool or particular device called imagination. Now, what is imagination? You know, ST Coleridge, my dear students, perhaps you might have studied ST Coleridge at your higher secondary level, at class 11, 12 level, and you might have studied his poems, if not all of you, but quite a few students, I hope, from among you are very much familiar with ST Coleridge. You know, in his criticism, he defines imagination and fancy. But I'm not going into a detailed analysis or interpretation of what, in fact,
Hello. हेलो
हेलो सर।
सर आपका माइक म्यूट है।
सर आपका माइक अनम्यूट कर दीजिए एक बार। हेलो सर। अजय सर। हेलो।
Sir, you are not
अजय सर
audible, sir.
आपका माइक।
अब आ रहा है? Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Now
sir,
we
अब
can
आ रहा
hear
है।
you.
For how long? You couldn't hear me.
Sir, 1 minute.
2 minutes.
Okay, sir. Okay, I'm sorry, sir. This is not my defect. This is the defect there in the, in the electronic device. So, I was perhaps talking about imagination. Imagination is that tool that gives us an idea about future, about something that hasn't happened today, about something unseen, about something new, about something creative, about something that remains unhidden to the physical eyes of the world. And now this device is very much needed on the part of an engineering student like you. And I can tell you, the moment you find yourself equipped with this strong device, you will be able to explore the whole world of science, and you will be in a position to create something something new, something innovative. You can quite easily create. Now, you might have heard how Newton, the great scientist, discovered the theory of gravity, the theory of, if I am not incorrect, so I've never been a student of science. Perhaps Newton was the first scientist to discover the theory of gravity. the laws of gravity, perhaps, to put it. You know, in our day-to-day life, everywhere in our practical life, we come across, ripened mangoes falling down from the trees, apple falling down. And, something extraordinary never occurs to us. When Newton discovered this, breakthrough laws, when he discovered it because of that power of imagination in him. I have always believed, and I have got tremendous conviction in the fact that a great scientist cannot be a great scientist without getting the power of imagination. A poet is usually and generally gifted with. Same was the case with Isaac Newton. Millions and billions of people might have seen the phenomenon of mangoes and apples falling down from trees, and nothing exceptional or nothing, extraordinary, or no kind of extraordinary feeling happened to them. It was he alone to whom something, some new kind of experience happened. He underwent a new kind of experience, and he was able to discover the laws of gravitation. So, in fact, it is the study of literature that provides you a platform from where you can enrich your imagination, you can improve your power of imagination, and it will be so powerful after getting equipped with this tool that you can create anything unprecedented in human history. Remember, when the first automotive engine was made in Europe or America, perhaps, I don't know whether, but perhaps in Europe, first automotive engine was made. It couldn't be made without the power of imagination on the part of those engineers or scientists involved with the process of making. Now, so I would always suggest you to study as much literature as possible, and in the process, you will realize how immensely you get benefited. You will have a unique experience. Now, let us move to some other points. Now, let me give you some other examples in order to promote a better understanding of the topic. You can hear me, perhaps, if I guess, there are some interruptions sometimes, and I have the feeling that, most of you on the other side cannot hear me, but I hope and I believe you can hear me. Can you hear me, sir? Can you hear me? Can you hear me, sir?
You are audible, sir. Audible.
Okay, sir. Now, let me turn now towards William Shakespeare. Let me now turn towards William Shakespeare, perhaps the greatest writer ever born on this planet. You know, he was a poet, he was a dramatist, and, you know, he was everything as far as the domain of literature was concerned. You know, he has always been accepted as the master of everything, and especially for his dramas, he remains unparalleled, unchallenged, even today. Now, let me quote some dramas of Shakespeare, and by quoting his dramas, I will try my level best to establish the fact that the study of literature can you know, can make a substantial contribution to the knowledge of engineering students in one particular area, and can enrich their personal lives, their practical life, and even their professional lives. Now, let me quote. Let me quote one particular drama out of 4 great tragedies that William Shakespeare has written. First of all, let me begin with Othello. Othello is one of the masterpieces of William Shakespeare. And let us not forget, my dear students, if you can hear me, let me tell you that all the great tragedies of William Shakespeare are having their names and titles after the names of the protagonists of those dramas. For example, Macbeth is the protagonist in the drama. You know, Hamlet is the protagonist in the drama, is the hero. King Lear. Lear is the hero in the drama, or the protagonist in the drama, and the name of the drama is King Lear. Similarly, Othello is the principal character, is the protagonist, and is the hero in the drama. Now, his wife, Desdemona. What a wonderful wife she is. Every young person in the world aspires to get a wife like Desdemona. After you go through her character, after you become familiar with who in fact Desdemona was, and how beautiful she was, not physically alone, but also from several, other perspectives, she was an extraordinary woman. Now, to begin with, such a great personality called Othello. I'm not, trying to go into any kind of detailed analysis of Othello because time and space cannot allow me. I'm trying to establish a point. I'm simply trying to establish a point. And in your practical life, it will make a big difference. You will realize how it will have a sort of, profound impact on your lives. Now, Othello begins to suspect his wife. This is not something new. In your, practical life, in your day-to-day life, you might have seen many husbands beginning to suspect their wives as well, especially when wives are, more Very beautiful. So, he began to suspect his wife, and he began to suspect that she was having an illicit relationship with the character in the drama called Diego. Now, he decided, the husband decided to kill his wife, to end the life of his wife, Destinoma. But the fact of the matter was that Desdemona was a woman of extraordinary character. She was a woman as pure as the rustic girl in the solitary reaper in the poem of William Wordsworth. She was as, she was as good as the eternal bliss or innocence that was there in the song of the nightingale. Now what happens? He kills his wife, and tragedy comes. Tragedy comes in his life. So tragedy in his life arrives, and he begins to suffer, and ultimately discovers the fact that Desdemona was not at all disloyal to him. That Desdemona was not at all, unfaithful to him, was not at all an example of ingratitude. But there was no turning back. There was no turning back now. He suffers both mentally and even to some extent physically. But mental agony is more intense than anything else in the world. So tragedy comes in his life. Now, what does this story beg your pardon, sir. What does the story suggest? What ideas does do the story suggest? The ideas, this particular story of Iago, beg your pardon, Desdemona, and Othello suggest is that everything in this world happens according to a rule, according to a pattern of nature, universal nature, fixed by the divine or universal law of nature. Othello was not a bad human being. Macbeth was not a bad human being. Lear was not a bad human being. Directly or indirectly, if you commit a mistake, if you break the laws of universal law of nature, if you break the laws related to the functioning of this universal nature, you violate something always fixed not to be violated. And therefore, you are bound to be punished. So, punishment they get as a reward of their mistakes, in spite of the fact that they may never ever have committed any serious wrong in their lives. So 1 minute, sir, let me take some water. डेढ़ घंटा में रख देते हैं क्या? मुंह दुखा गया बेटा. हेलो भुटे सर. Bhute sir, I would like to conclude because of some problems. Please don't mind. Hello.
Kalpana. Yeah. Ramesh.
You can, if time
Yes.
permits you, give me some time
Yes.
on some other day, tomorrow or the day after tomorrow.
Okay, sir. Okay. Ratnesh,
Right now, I would
Yes,
like to
sir.
conclude, sir.
just 1 minute.
Uh,
Yes, vote of thank will be done.
Yes,
okay,
sir.
sir. My
Hello?
lecture. Sir. Madam. Yes, sir. Yes. Can you hear me?
I am Sonali Sharma from second year student of Gaya College of
Wait,
Engineering, Gaya.
wait.
Okay. You have any questions,
Sir,
Sonali?
sir want to conclude. Yes, sir. You please conclude, sir, first.
Can you ask your students for putting some questions to me? Can
Sure,
you
sir.
guide them to put some questions to me?
All the participants are requested to put the question. Now you have listened this lecture on Mahabharata and many aspects he has discussed. Yes, please. Yes, I think there is no question, sir.
Okay, if time and if time in the program, as far as the 5-day workshop is concerned, if time permits you, give me an extra time uh, tomorrow or the day after tomorrow, or
Okay.
as per your convenience. I will be very
Yes, sir.
happy. Today I feel extremely tired because I have attended a class after such a long time.
Okay, okay, sir. We will arrange
Okay.
one more lectures when we will get the time.
And ask your students to be ready with some, fundamental questions, some good fundamental questions, basic questions, so that a good interaction between the two sides can take place. Interaction between the two sides. Learning today is no longer a one-way process. Let me tell all my students. I would have been happier have had I been over there face to face with you. It's unfortunate, this pandemic called COVID-19 has, taken away all those, privileges from us. And therefore, unfortunately, I'm online, having an interaction with you. This is for the first time that I'm having this kind of an interaction. My mouth has gone dry. I took a glass of water. Professor Bute, thanks a lot. You gave me time. Today it's a wonderful experience. I thank your principal as well. I thank the chief patron as well. But most important of all, my love and heartfelt affection to all the students who are watching me online. Thank you, sir. And all your staff, all your colleagues, thank them. Thank you very much, sir.
As I request Sonali to vote of thank.
Yes, sir. I am Sonali Sharma from second year student of Gaya College of Engineering, Gaya.
Yes, Sonali. Carry on. Yes, Sonali. Hello. Hello.
Yes, someone
Hello.
removed him.
Hello.
Yes,
Someone
yes,
removed
I
that.
can hear.
Sorry for the disturbance.
And not to remove anyone. Yes. Just a moment, sir. She will rejoin.
Okay, sir. And
Yes, sir,
where is
someone
my
is
brother?
removing the students.
Bhutte sir, where is my brother?
Yes, your brother is here. Okay. Behind the curtain, behind the camera.
Can I see him?
Yes. I request Professor Alok sir to come here. Okay, Ratnesh, in between, ask her to join.
Hello, sir. Hello.
Sonali, yes, I can hear. I can hear you, Sonali.
Sonali, just a minute, just a minute. Sonali, just a minute.
Okay, sir.
What happened to you, sir?
Yes, I can hear. Carry on.
Why you are going to conclude earlier?
You see, my mouth went dry. I am attending this class after such a long gap of time. I never get time to attend a class. It's more than some 6 months or so after I got to retirement, and in fact, it's quite natural. Despite the fact that it was a wonderful experience talking to students online, talking to teachers online. Having said that, you know, my mouth, especially inside my mouth.
Okay,
You
sir.
know, yes.
Okay, sir. We will discuss it later. Okay, on some other days.
Yes, definitely. I have requested Professor Bhute to
I
find out time for me
okay,
on some other day,
thanks, and all.
because ultimately it's a.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Please, Sonali, continue.
Okay, sir.
Yes.
As volunteer of this workshop, Organized Community Science and Humanities Department, Gaya College of Engineering, Gaya, it gives me an immense pleasure to deliver the vote of thanks for this special function held here. I would like to thank our chief guest, Professor Ajay Pandey, sir, who honored this function with his inspirational thoughts. Thank
Thank you, Sonali. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, everybody over there on the other side, sir. It was a pleasure talking to you. It was a pleasure talking to my students.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Bhute sir.
Thank you,
you.
sir.
Thanks a
Thank you
lot,
so
sir.
much, sir.
Okay, sir.
Uh,
Okay.
I request all the participants, the second session has been over, today's session. Tomorrow we will have another chief guest, and tomorrow we will meet again to you at 11 o'clock
Sir,
with
excuse me, sir.
new expert.
Sir,
Yes,
excuse me. Sir,
yes,
sir, from tomorrow you can make the attendee of all the students because, sir,
yes, yes.
someone remove.
That
Yeah,
technical problem will be solved. Yesterday, when the link was generated, I have not paid the attention towards that. Okay, so
Yes,
definitely
yes,
the problem which faced today, that will not be tomorrow. Yes, have you enjoyed
yes, sir.
all the
Definitely.
participants?
yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so thank you, Sonali, thank you, Ratnesh, for technical support and this
Thank you, sir.
anchoring and vote of thanks. Tomorrow we will see to you again.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.